Imagine walking into a room where everyone smiles at you, but beneath those smiles lies a silent judgment, one that follows you wherever you go. You can't see it written on their faces, but you feel it. It's in the way people clutch their bags tighter when you pass by. It's in the teacher who assumes you're less capable before you've even opened your mouth. It's in the job interview where you're told, "We'll call you," but the call never comes. This is modern-day racism. Hidden, polished, dressed in a suit and tie. No burning crosses. No whites-only signs. But alive, as sharp as painful, and as destructive as ever. For decades, America has told itself a comforting story. That racism died in the 1960s with the civil rights movement. That Martin Luther King's dream was fulfilled when segregation ended, and when, in 2008, the country elected its first black president. Headlines shouted, "We live in a post-racial society." But that story is a lie. Racism didn't vanish. It evolved. It slipped underground, reshaped itself, and became more subtle. Instead of yelling slurs, it whispers stereotypes. Instead of passing Jim Crow laws, it hides inside zoning codes, voter restrictions, and hiring practices. Instead of chains made of iron, it uses chains of debt, poverty, and systemic inequality. You see, modern racism is not always loud. It doesn't always announce itself with violence. Often it hides in plain sight. And that's what makes it even more dangerous, because when something is hidden, it's easier to deny, easier to ignore, easier to pretend it doesn't exist. So, in this journey, we will uncover the many faces of modern racism. We will peel back the polished layers of society to reveal the wounds underneath. From classrooms to courtrooms, from boardrooms to hospitals, we will see how racism continues to shape lives. Not just in moments of crisis, but in the quiet, everyday decisions that decide who gets opportunity and who doesn't. And through it all, we will listen to the voices of those who live it daily. Voices that remind us that history is not the past. It is the present. Because modern-day racism is hidden. But it is still alive. The illusion of progress. When the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s reached its peak, many believed America had finally confronted its darkest demon. The marchers, the speeches, the sacrifices, they all seemed to culminate in a new dawn. Segregation was outlawed. The Voting Rights Act was passed. Schools were ordered to integrate. On paper, the walls of oppression crumbled. And yet, behind the applause, behind the headlines, racism did not die. It adapted. The illusion of progress is one of the most powerful disguises racism has ever worn. For decades, this illusion has lulled many into thinking the fight was over. The imagery of Martin Luther King Jr. standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, declaring his dream, became a symbol of victory. But what was left out of the story was how violently that dream was resisted, and how deeply the roots of racism remained planted in the soil of America. Fast forward to 2008. Barack Obama is elected the 44th President of the United States, the first black man to hold the highest office in the land. Crowds wept. Commentators declared, America has entered a post-racial era. For many, this was the ultimate proof that racism had been defeated. If a black man could be president, surely the barriers were gone, the struggles overcome. But that moment of pride and celebration masked a harsh truth. Representation does not equal liberation. Obama's election didn't dismantle systemic racism. In fact, his presidency exposed just how alive it still was. The backlash was immediate and intense. Hate groups surged in membership. Political leaders built entire platforms on questioning his legitimacy, spreading racist conspiracy theories that claimed he wasn't even American. The mere presence of a black man in power became a trigger for centuries of fear and resentment. And yet, many Americans clung to the illusion. They pointed to Obama and said, "See? Racism is over." They dismissed the cries of those who still face discrimination daily, insisting those experiences were exaggerated or imagined. But let's be clear, progress is not the same as victory. Yes, the legal chains of segregation were broken. Yes, opportunities have expanded. But racism has a way of slipping through cracks, reinventing itself in forms that are harder to fight. Instead of separate water fountains, we have segregated neighborhoods. Instead of literacy tests for voting, we have voter ID laws and polling place closures in black communities. Instead of open signs of hatred, we have coded language, terms like urban crime, welfare queens, and tough-on-crime policies that carry the same old message. The illusion of progress is dangerous because it silences the struggle. It convinces the privileged majority that nothing more needs to be done. It tells them that racism is history, while those living it every day know it is very much the present. Think about this. If racism truly ended in the 1960s, why are black families still earning only a fraction of what white families make on average? Why are black mothers still 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white mothers? Why are black men still disproportionately stopped, searched, arrested, and killed by police? These are not accidents. They are not coincidences. They are the legacy of a system that never truly went away. It just learned to blend in. And perhaps that is the cruelest trick of all. Because when racism wore a white hood, it was easy to see. When it was written in Jim Crow laws, it was undeniable. But now, cloaked in the illusion of progress, it hides in plain sight. And when those who suffer speak up, they are often told, "You're imagining it. Things are better now. Don't be so sensitive." The truth is, things are better, but better does not mean equal. Better does not mean just. Better does not mean free. The illusion of progress comforts those who want to believe America has moved beyond its racist past. But for those living under the weight of its hidden presence, progress is not enough. The dream is not yet fulfilled. Modern racism thrives in the shadow of this illusion. And to confront it, we must first strip that illusion away. Racism in the shadows. Racism today rarely announces itself with snarling dogs and burning crosses. Instead, it slips quietly into conversations, into policies, into daily interactions. It hides in plain sight, disguised as normal, professional, or even just the way things are. This is racism in the shadows. For many black people, it begins in childhood. Picture a young black boy in school. He raises his hand to answer a question, eager and bright. But the teacher hesitates, calls on another child instead. When he speaks up anyway, his answer is brushed aside, his confidence quietly chipped away. Studies show that black children are more likely to be disciplined, suspended, or labeled as troublemakers than their white classmates for the same behavior. A black girl may be told her natural hair is unprofessional or distracting, sending the message that who she is as she is unacceptable. These are not accidents. They're patterns, and they shape lives. Move forward to the workplace. Imagine sitting in an interview room, resume polished, qualifications solid. The manager smiles, shakes your hand, but notices your name. Deshaun, Jamal, Aaliyah. Suddenly, you're no longer just another candidate. Studies confirm this. Job applicants with black-sounding names are less likely to get callbacks than those with white-sounding names, even when their resumes are identical. This is racism without slurs, without shouts. It is polite, quiet, hidden, and therefore easier for those who benefit from it to deny. Housing tells the same story. Decades after redlining was outlawed, black families still face discrimination when trying to buy or rent homes. Real estate agents steer them away from certain neighborhoods. Banks are more likely to deny their loan applications or charge higher interest rates. The result? Black families are locked out of wealth-building opportunities, trapped in cycles that span generations. Then there is healthcare. Black patients often find their pain dismissed or minimized. Black women, in particular, are at a shocking disadvantage. They are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. Not because of biology, but because of systemic neglect, bias, and unequal treatment. A black patient might wait longer in the emergency room. Their concerns might be brushed aside. Their lives silently devalued. This is racism in the shadows. No signs on doors. No open declarations. Just quiet disparities that add up to devastating outcomes. And then there are microaggressions, those small comments that sting because they reveal what lies beneath. "You're so articulate," said with surprise, as though intelligence was unexpected. "Where are you really from?" As though blackness cannot belong here. "I don't see color," meant to be kind, but erasing the reality of racial experience. Each microaggression by itself may seem minor, even dismissible. But together, they form a weight that is carried every single day. 1,000 tiny cuts that never heal. Media plays its part too. Turn on the news and watch how stories are told. A young white man who commits violence is often described as troubled or mentally ill. A young black man in the same situation is labeled a thug. Mugshots are shown for black suspects, school photos for white ones. These subtle differences shape public perception, feeding stereotypes that persist without question. And politics? Racism in the shadows thrives there as well. Instead of openly saying, "We don't want black people to vote," lawmakers close polling places in black neighborhoods, cut early voting hours, or pass strict voter ID laws that disproportionately affect minorities. The language is neutral. The impact is not. This is the trick of modern racism. It hides behind excuses, behind professionalism, behind policies that claim neutrality. But neutrality, when built on a foundation of inequality, is not justice. It is oppression repackaged. And for those who benefit from this hidden racism, denial comes easily. They say, "You're overreacting." They insist, "That's not about race." But for those living it, the pattern is unmistakable. It is there in the job they didn't get, the house they couldn't buy, the doctor who didn't listen, the police officer who saw them as a threat before a person. Racism in the shadows is not less harmful than the racism of the past. In many ways, it is more insidious because it gaslights its victims. It forces them to question their own experiences, to doubt themselves, to wonder, "Am I imagining this?" And while the old racism shouted, this new racism whispers. But make no mistake, the damage is just as real. Modern racism doesn't always wear a hood. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it wears a badge. Sometimes it smiles at you, shakes your hand, and calls you friend. That is how it survives. That is how it thrives. The justice system. If there is one place where modern racism refuses to stay hidden, it is in the justice system. From the moment of suspicion to the final gavel in court, the system exposes its bias in ways that are impossible to ignore, unless, of course, you're not the one living it. Picture this. 2 teenagers are caught with drugs. One is white, one is black. The white teen is quietly sent home with a warning. The black teen is handcuffed, booked, and thrown into a system that will follow him for the rest of his life. This isn't a rare story. It's the reality. Let's look at the numbers. Black Americans make up about 13% of the U.S. population, yet they account for nearly 40% of the prison population. That's not because black people commit more crimes. Study after study shows that drug use, for example, occurs at similar rates across races. But arrests? Convictions? Sentences? Those tilt heavily against black communities. The infamous crack versus powder cocaine laws tell this story with brutal clarity. In the 1980s, possession of crack cocaine, which devastated black inner-city neighborhoods, carried sentences up to 100 times harsher than powder cocaine, more common in white suburbs. The drug was essentially the same. The difference was who was using it. The result? Black families were ripped apart. Generations lost to prison cells. Children raised without parents. Communities destabilized. And while some of those sentencing disparities have been reduced in recent years, the damage remains. Thousands still carry the weight of convictions that would not have destroyed their lives if their skin had been lighter. Policing tells its own story. Traffic stops. Random searches. The constant surveillance of black neighborhoods. A black driver is more likely to be pulled over, more likely to be searched, and more likely to be arrested than a white driver. Black people are more likely to be stopped and frisked, even when they're less likely to be found carrying weapons or drugs. And then there is the violence. Names we now know by heart: George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, countless others who never became hashtags. Each one a reminder that, for black people, the presence of police is not always protection. It can be a threat. A routine stop can become a death sentence. A misunderstanding can become a tragedy. The courts are no refuge. A black defendant and a white defendant can stand before the same judge, accused of the same crime, with similar records, and the black defendant will likely receive a harsher sentence. Judges, prosecutors, juries, the bias runs deep, whether intentional or unconscious. And once branded a criminal, the punishment doesn't end at release. A criminal record locks people out of jobs, housing, and even the right to vote. It creates a cycle that traps entire communities in poverty and despair. The justice system is often called blind, but in truth, it sees color very clearly. And it acts on that vision. Supporters of the system often argue that it is tough on crime. But tough on crime has too often meant tough on blackness. The language of law and order has been a thin veil for policies that target and devastate Black communities. From mandatory minimums to three-strikes laws, from stop and frisk to broken windows policing, the message has been consistent. Black lives are policed more harshly, punished more severely, and valued less equally. This is not just history. It is the present. The prison industrial complex thrives on it. Private prisons profit when cells are full. Police departments receive funding based on arrests. Politicians gain votes by stoking fear of crime, fear that is almost always racialized. And for those who live outside this reality, it is easy to believe the myth that if someone is in prison, they must deserve it. That if someone is stopped by police, they must have done something wrong. But when you look closer, the truth emerges. The system is not broken. It is working exactly as it was designed, to maintain control, to protect privilege, to punish difference. For Black communities, the justice system has never been just. It has been a pipeline, from over-policed neighborhoods to overcrowded prisons. A machine that turns poverty into punishment and race into a sentence. And yet, despite this, Black resilience endures. Families fight for loved ones behind bars. Communities rally for reform. Movements rise up, demanding accountability, demanding change. But the shadow of the justice system still looms large. A shadow that says, in every traffic stop, every courtroom, every prison cell, racism is hidden, but it is alive. Economic chains. Slavery may have ended in 1865, but the economic chains it forged were never fully broken. Instead, they were reshaped, passed down, and hidden in systems that still define wealth and opportunity today. Think of wealth as a relay race. One generation passes the baton to the next: property, education, savings, investments, connections. For white families in America, that baton has been handed down for centuries, growing stronger with each exchange. For Black families, the baton was often stolen, dropped, or never given at all. Let's go back. After emancipation, formerly enslaved people were promised 40 acres and a mule, a chance to finally build their own futures. That promise was broken almost immediately. Land was returned to former slaveholders, and Black families were left with nothing. While white farmers expanded their property, Black families were pushed into sharecropping, a system designed to keep them in debt and dependency. Generations later, when America introduced the GI Bill after World War II, millions of returning veterans built wealth through education, home ownership, and business opportunities. But Black veterans were systematically excluded. Banks refused to give them loans. Universities turned them away. Real estate agents blocked them from white neighborhoods. The result? White families skyrocketed into the middle class, while Black families were locked out once again. Redlining sealed the deal. In the 1930s, federal housing maps literally marked Black neighborhoods in red, declaring them too risky for loans. That meant banks refused mortgages, businesses avoided investment, and property values stagnated. Meanwhile, white neighborhoods flourished, their wealth multiplying with each passing year. Even though redlining was outlawed decades ago, its impact is still visible today. Many historically redlined neighborhoods remain underdeveloped, underfunded, and overpoliced. And then there's employment. A Black worker with a college degree is more likely to be unemployed than a white worker with only a high school diploma. When employed, Black workers often earn less for the same job. In corporate spaces, the higher up you look, the fewer Black faces you see. Diversity slogans may decorate websites, but pay gaps and promotion disparities tell the real story. The numbers don't lie. The median wealth of a white family in America is nearly 10 times greater than that of a Black family. This isn't because Black families don't work hard. It's because the system was designed to reward whiteness and punish Blackness, generation after generation. Healthcare costs, student loans, predatory lending, all hit Black families harder. Payday loan stores crowd Black neighborhoods, charging outrageous interest rates where traditional banks refuse to set up shop. Meanwhile, access to quality healthcare and affordable insurance remains limited, deepening the cycle of disadvantage. Consider this. If racism truly were gone, Black homeownership rates would not still lag far behind white ones. Black mothers wouldn't still be more likely to be denied mortgages, even with good credit. Black entrepreneurs wouldn't still struggle to secure business loans at the same rates as white entrepreneurs. These are not individual failures. They are systemic designs. Economic chains don't just weigh down wallets, they weigh down futures. When a family struggles to afford stable housing, their children attend underfunded schools. Those children face limited opportunities, fewer resources, and greater challenges. Poverty becomes generational, not because of lack of ambition, but because of lack of access. And yet, despite these chains, Black communities have always found ways to create, to build, to rise. From the self-sustaining businesses of Tulsa's Black Wall Street before it was destroyed, to today's movements supporting Black-owned businesses, resilience has always been part of the story. But resilience does not erase injustice. To this day, the economic playing field is not level. When a Black worker has to work twice as hard to earn half as much, that is not progress. When a Black family is more likely to lose their home in a financial crisis, that is not equality. When economic opportunity is promised but never delivered, the chains remain. The cruelty of these economic chains lies in their invisibility. They don't look like shackles, but they are just as binding. They don't clang or rattle, but they silence dreams all the same. And until those chains are broken, until wealth, opportunity, and stability are accessible to all, regardless of skin color, racism will remain not just alive, but thriving in the very heart of America's economy. Cultural racism. Culture is power. It tells us who we are, what we value, and who belongs. It shapes the stories we see, the music we hear, the images we consume. And for centuries, American culture has carried a quiet poison. Racism woven into the very narratives that define society. This is cultural racism, not laws or policies, but the stories and symbols that teach us, often unconsciously, whose lives matter more. Think about film and television. For decades, Black people were portrayed as caricatures, the mammy, the savage, the criminal, the comic relief. These stereotypes weren't harmless entertainment. They reinforced dangerous ideas. A Black man on screen as a violent thug made it easier to justify police aggression. A Black woman portrayed as loud and uneducated made it easier to dismiss her in real life. Even today, progress in representation is uneven. Yes, there are more Black actors, directors, and creators than ever before. Yes, films like Black Panther have shattered box office records and proven that Black stories are universal. But at the same time, harmful tropes persist. Too often, Black characters are written as sidekicks instead of heroes, background instead of center stage. And behind the camera, decision-making power still rests overwhelmingly in white hands. News media tells its own story. Consider how crime is reported. When the suspect is Black, mugshots flood the screen. When the suspect is white, childhood photos or smiling portraits appear. When the victim is Black, their past is dissected for flaws. When the victim is white, their innocence is highlighted. These subtle differences aren't just details. They shape the public imagination, creating an unspoken narrative. Whiteness is human, Blackness is dangerous. Then there is music. Black art forms, jazz, blues, rock, hip-hop, have not only shaped American culture but defined it. Yet time and again, Black artists have seen their creations stolen, watered down, and profited from by others. Rock and roll was pioneered by Black musicians like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, yet history books often crown Elvis Presley as the king. Hip-hop, born from the struggle and creativity of Black communities, is now a global industry, but Black artists still fight for ownership and fair pay. This is cultural appropriation, when Black creativity is consumed, imitated, and profited from, without respect for the people and struggles behind it. Hairstyles once mocked on Black women become fashion when worn by white celebrities. Vernacular once dismissed as ghetto becomes trendy slang when adopted by influencers. The culture is loved, but the people are not. Even beauty carries the mark of cultural racism. For centuries, Eurocentric features, straight hair, lighter skin, thin noses, have been upheld as the standard. Magazines, advertisements, and beauty pageants sent the same message again and again. Whiteness is beautiful, Blackness is not. The result? Generations of Black women pressured to straighten their hair, lighten their skin, and conform to standards that erase their identity. Only in recent years has the natural hair movement begun to reclaim beauty on its own terms. But the struggle against bias in schools and workplaces continues. Language is another battlefield. Terms like articulate are used as backhanded compliments, implying surprise when a Black person speaks with intelligence. African American Vernacular English, AAV, a legitimate dialect with its own grammar and history, is ridiculed as incorrect when spoken by Black people but celebrated as cool when adopted by outsiders. These cultural dynamics are not trivial. They shape how people see the world, and how they see each other. When blackness is constantly portrayed as less, inferior, dangerous, or disposable, those perceptions seep into society's veins. They influence teachers, employers, juries, doctors, and politicians. Cultural racism also works by erasure. How many people know about Mansa Musa, one of the richest men in history, who ruled the Mali Empire? How many schools teach about thriving African kingdoms before colonization? How often are black inventors, scientists, and leaders highlighted in history books? Too often, black history is reduced to slavery and civil rights, ignoring the brilliance, innovation, and leadership that have always been part of the story. And yet, in the face of erasure and distortion, black culture has never stopped creating, resisting, and redefining. From gospel to hip-hop, from Harlem Renaissance poets to contemporary filmmakers, black voices have spoken truth to power, even when the world tried not to listen. The danger of cultural racism is its subtlety. It doesn't always scream hatred. Sometimes it whispers through casting decisions, headlines, or fashion trends. Sometimes it's a joke at a comedy show. Sometimes it's a viral TikTok dance credited to the wrong creator. But each moment, each distortion, reinforces a system where blackness is consumed but not respected, imitated but not valued. Culture is where hearts and minds are shaped. And when racism lives there, even hidden, it influences everything else, from justice to economics to politics. This is why reclaiming culture matters. Why telling our own stories matters. Why representation is not just about faces on a screen, but about shifting narratives, challenging stereotypes, and demanding that black humanity be seen in its full complexity. Because as long as culture continues to carry the poison of racism, hidden but alive, society will continue to drink it, often without realizing how deeply it affects us all. Resistance and resilience. If racism is hidden but alive, so too is something else, resistance. From the beginning, black people have not only endured oppression, they have fought it, resisted it, and created beauty and strength in the face of it. This story is not only about pain. It is about resilience. Consider the history of slavery. Even in bondage, enslaved Africans found ways to resist. Some escaped through networks like the Underground Railroad. Some rebelled in uprisings, risking death for freedom. Many more resisted in quieter ways, keeping African traditions alive through song, spirituality, and community, reminding themselves and their children that they were human even when the world denied it. During Jim Crow, resistance took new forms. In the face of segregation, black communities built their own schools, churches, and businesses. They created towns like Rosewood and Greenwood, places known as Black Wall Street, where black wealth and pride flourished despite constant threats. Though many of these towns were violently destroyed, their existence proves that resilience was never just survival. It was creation. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s is remembered as one of the greatest waves of resistance in history. But it was not just Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches or Rosa Parks' bravery. It was also the thousands of ordinary people who marched, sat in, registered voters, and faced arrest and violence for the dream of equality. Their resilience cracked the walls of Jim Crow and forced America to confront its hypocrisy. Today, resistance continues. The killing of Trayvon Martin in 2012 sparked the birth of Black Lives Matter, a movement that began as a hashtag and grew into a global demand for justice. Millions of people, black and non-black, marched in the streets after the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others. These protests were not only about individual cases. They were about a system that still values black lives less. But resistance is not only in the streets. It is in classrooms where black educators fight to teach history honestly, even as laws try to silence them. It is in workplaces where black professionals demand equal treatment and representation. It is in art where filmmakers, writers, and musicians tell stories that reclaim power and truth. Resilience also lives in everyday life. It is the mother who teaches her son how to survive a police stop, even as her heart breaks that she must. It is the student who thrives in a school system designed to underestimate them. It is the community that rallies together when one of their own is taken too soon. And resilience is joy. Too often, blackness is portrayed only through struggle. But black resilience is also laughter, love, creativity, and triumph. It is the sound of gospel choirs filling churches. It is Juneteenth celebrations of freedom. It is the rise of black entrepreneurs, athletes, and leaders who refuse to be defined by limitation. Consider Barack Obama, who shattered a barrier once thought impossible. His presidency did not end racism. In fact, it exposed how alive it remained. But his rise symbolized resilience, proof that progress, though incomplete, is real. Consider Serena Williams and LeBron James, who dominate sports that once excluded black athletes, and who use their platforms to speak truth. Consider Oprah Winfrey, who turned a marginalized voice into one of the most powerful in media. Yet resilience is not just about individual success. It is about collective survival. When the system works against you for generations, to still be here, still creating, still dreaming, still fighting, is itself resistance. There is a proverb. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. That is the story of Black resilience. Every attempt to erase or suppress has only sparked new growth. Every attack has been met with creativity, courage, and community. But resilience should not be romanticized. Survival in the face of oppression is not something to celebrate as if pain were necessary for greatness. The goal is not to endure forever, but to create a world where such endurance is no longer required. That is why resistance continues. Through policy change, through activism, through art, through education, Black people and their allies push forward, refusing to accept racism, hidden or otherwise, as permanent. And so, when we look at modern-day racism, we must also look at modern-day resilience. For while racism is hidden but alive, so too is the spirit of resistance, alive, powerful, and unstoppable. Because in the end, history has shown one truth again and again. Systems of oppression may be vast and powerful, but they have never been greater than the resilience of the people they seek to crush. Racism today does not always wear a hood or shout a slur. More often it whispers. It hides in boardrooms, in classrooms, in laws and headlines, in culture and silence. It disguises itself as neutrality, professionalism, tradition, or even progress. But make no mistake, it is still here. Hidden, but alive. And yet, the story does not end with oppression. The story continues with resilience, with resistance, with the unshakable truth that Black lives, Black culture, and Black voices will not be erased. We have seen it through centuries, from the enslaved who preserved songs of freedom, to the marchers who faced dogs and fire hoses, to the protesters today who raise their fists and say, "No more." We have seen it in art, in music, in scholarship, in entrepreneurship, Black creativity shaping not just America, but the world. We have seen it in families who pass down strength like an heirloom, who teach their children to walk with pride in a world that too often tries to diminish them. The fight against racism is not only about exposing injustice, it is also about building a future where justice is not selective, where culture does not distort, where opportunity is not rationed by race. A future where resilience is no longer about survival, but about thriving without barriers. That future cannot be left to chance. It must be demanded. It must be fought for. It must be imagined into existence. Because racism, modern, hidden, alive, will not disappear on its own. Silence will not defeat it. Denial will not erase it. Only truth, courage, and collective action can. So, as you listen to these stories, as you reflect on the pain, the history, and the resilience, remember this. Racism may still be alive, but so is resistance. So is hope. So is the possibility of change. And that change begins not with someone else, somewhere else, but with us. With you. With the choices we make, the voices we raise, and the truths we refuse to ignore. Because the story of racism is not finished. The next chapter is being written now. The question is, what role will you play? This is Black Voices Unchained. Don't forget to subscribe for more.